Please rise and we'll do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we have a little bit of a busy agenda this morning. You'll note that there's two additions to approve the agenda and to approve the minutes of the previous meeting that have been handwritten and added on to your agendas if you wish to write them in yourself. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Has everyone had an opportunity to, I know we're late on the packets this particular time as we're still getting organized. Does everyone have the, has everyone had the opportunity to read the minutes, or would you like to take a minute to do so? You're good?
I'll move for approval of the minutes of December 13.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This is the opportunity now for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make public comment before we get started? Seeing none, item number 1 for discussion, Secretary of State filings. General managers.
Yeah, so from an administrative point of view, one of the procedural things we have to do is to file, the proceedings, if you will, and the agreement along with the original ordinances with the Secretary of State. We've been in contact with our office, and it's pretty straightforward. All we really need to do is just to take the copy that we had of the agreement. It has since been filled in with the name of the commission, the officers, and so on and so forth that had the associated blanks in the contacts. And so it's now complete with regards to its content. And we would take and submit a signed copy of that along with the original ordinances and a cover letter that's attached in your packet to the Secretary of State. So it's really nothing more than an administrative procedure. The copies were given to you, so you have a complete copy of the final agreement along with all of those exhibits and that cover letter that I put together that was required to go with the filing. So.
Okay. We'll take a moment to look at the cover letter. Do you need a motion or direction from the board with respect to this item, or is this just information?
I think it's just informational, unless there's anything else that needs to go on here. What we really need to do is we need to get Commissioners Soa and Platt again to sign the copy, so that because we filled it back in, we need an official copy to go forward. So after this meeting, we'll collect those signatures, and I think we'll put that thing forward. So, and that should take care of the administrative things we have to do in terms of forming the commission. Okay.
Any questions from board members? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move forward. Thank you. Insurance coverage.
Yeah, one of the things that, one of the first business steps we have to do is talk about insuring the commission. And we have had initial conversations with SDAO, and we are in conversations with them. Because of the history of the past of what's gone on with regards to the CRW's insurance, this has raised some issues again with SDAO about insurance, and we're in the middle of conversations with them right now about possible changes to indemnification and or insurance type coverage to allow for the appropriate pathway forward. And so I know that Clark Balfour, who's with us here today, has had some conversations with SDO recently, and had him give us an update on what's going on with that.
Good morning, Mr. Bell.
period.
Thank you. So, as Wade said, there are some issues that were raised by Special Districts Association of Oregon, who insures Sunrise. CRW has a different carrier, although they did have SDO at one point, and then the question was, well, as we move to get insurance for the commission itself, SDO was our first choice because it provides a pretty beneficial, low-cost product. That was when we had some issues with SDO as far as some of the language in our agreement. And what they're most concerned about is section 13.1 and 13.2 of the agreement, which are standard insurance and indemnity provisions. So it's typical for, you know, in this circumstance, the commission, Sunrise, and CRW to agree to indemnify each other for their own negligent or wrongful acts. Fairly typical, and you have a fairly typical clause. And ultimately, it's an analysis of who's responsible, and the payment or the responsibility for payment in some kind of a damage situation or something like that will follow the actor. So the indemnity clause itself that you have in that agreement is fairly typical. Now, how do you fund the indemnity obligation? That's where your insurance comes in. And so that is what generated then discussions with SDO and other carriers. And as Wade said, some of the history between CRW and SDAO makes SDO very cautious about issuing a policy to the commission, because you've got these indemnity provisions that may drag, from SDAO's perspective, drag their insurance policy into, once again, covering, or at least having the potential to cover, what might be CRW acts. And so there was reluctance there. You know, there really are three major areas that we're talking about. One is your typical negligence action for damages. That really doesn't concern SDAO as far as issuing a policy to the commission. Primarily, you're going to have acts of Sunrise, acts of CRW. At this point, the commission itself is not going to be engaging in a lot of business activities, having people in the trench, you know, repairing pipe, doing that sort of thing. That may come later, but it's not really at play now. What SDO is really concerned about is a couple of, I think, fairly unique provisions within their insurance policy. I mean, and those two provisions are, number one, they will provide defense coverage up to $25,000 for injunctive actions, not damage actions, but injunctive actions. So, you know, you fail to do something that you're obligated to do as a public servant, someone brings an injunction action to compel you to do something or to prevent you from doing something. That's number one, $25,000. The other one is for the Ethics Commission, Oregon Government Ethics Commission, they will provide up to $2,500 in coverage for defense coverage for those sorts of claims. Now, you know how lawyers are, $2,500 in the ethics sense, $25,000 in a court injunctive proceeding, it's going to go pretty fast, and then their obligation is done. But they don't want any possibility that they could be involved with some case involving, you know, CRW activities. So, what SDO would prefer to do is that we rewrite our indemnity provisions to just say everybody's going to be responsible for their own acts, period, and there's going to be no contractual indemnity provision. Essentially, 13.1 would go away. That's their preferred option. What we've been talking to them about is, well, for the commission, why don't you write a policy that excludes coverage for the injunctive relief and the ethics commission piece as well. It's not that much coverage anyway. You know, you have the opportunity, you're essentially electing to self-insure. You're going to take that risk on yourself. And so that's been the nature of the discussions that we've had. If we were to take the SDO preferred approach, we would have to amend the agreement. We'd have to take it back to the respective boards for approval. And so there's a process point with that. It can be done very easily. It's just going to be a process point and a timing point. If we negotiate to have the policy exclude those two coverages, which I don't think would really be increasing anybody's risk point that much, then we wouldn't have to amend the agreement. It would would just be a matter of the policy issuance documents that come from the carrier to say, we will, in spite of what our policy says, we are excluding coverage B4 and B5, as an example, that sort of thing. So, you know, those are the two real options. The third option would be we go and just try to find another company for the commission. I don't know that that would really be beneficial. I think SDO writes a pretty good policy. So if we can try to work within that, I think that'd be my recommendation to you. But, you know, there may be other ways to go as well. I haven't been involved in any discussions as far as you know, other companies that may be involved. I don't know if you folks have in any of that. So I think, I guess my thought today would be, rather than amend the agreement, we try to negotiate some special policy consideration with SDO and see where that takes us. I don't know if the managers, though, may have a different take on that, but.
I just have one question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
CRW has a $50,000 deductible with, or had with our policies. Is there any way that we could hold those funds in reserve? Would that satisfy that requirement?
Well, it might. I mean, I did not talk to SDO specifically about some kind of a, you know, a holdback or creating an account that they can see is available.
So that way it wouldn't be affecting Sunrise, it would just be CRW, because that's what they're worried about in the meeting that we had with them anyway. So I thought about that as maybe an alternative.
It would be. I just haven't discussed it with them specifically.
Yes.
Just an aside, if I may, what's the timeline we need to get this done?
You know, I don't know that there's, well, I don't know there's all that much urgency because we're just getting the documents filed with Secretary of State now. At this point, the commission doesn't, we haven't funded it with assets. There's, you know, the plant is really what we're talking about for the most part, and that is, you know, obviously in CRW's name, and it's going to stay in CRW's name. So I don't know that there's any commission level activities that are going to put you at risk in the foreseeable future that you need to cover, because you've already got your coverage for CRW and you've already got your coverage for Sunrise. And so whatever happens is really going to be, you know, the acts of one of those two entities. So the commission is kind of, I don't want to say in limbo, but it's in its, you know, formative stages. And so there's not going to be a lot of activity that creates risk that you'd want to insure for some period.
Questions from the board? Yes.
This question's for you, or probably Mr. Moore. CRW has an insurance agent of record. Are we allowed to, how does the statute allow us to go outside of the agent's purview to negotiate a contract with another agency?
He has been involved in these discussions.
Okay.
We have collectively met with Sunrise and SDA.
Any other questions?
Well,
Yes.
I guess I would be prepared to say, it sounds like we have a little bit of time, if it's this board's will, that we follow the path that Mr. Balfour suggested about getting an exemption for those issues that are in 13.1, as well as the idea that Lee Moore put on the table of a set-aside deposit that would cover whatever the risk actually is anyway. Both of those issues, and then come back to us with what they're able to find that is available to us, that includes either or both of those things. If it needs to be a motion, we can, but I don't think it really does.
Right now, we're still procedural.
So I think board consensus would work fine.
Just so that I understand this clearly, what you're suggesting is that there would be insurance coverage on Sunrise's half, but CRW's half would put up a bond or hold back fund, or would just cover it for all of us? We would just take that section out.
Well, if we want to try to avoid amending the agreement, then what we would do is go to the carrier and negotiate a policy for the commission. And I'm not sure if it would require a change to the CRW policy or not. That'd be a side question. But essentially, SDO would write a policy for the commission that would say, we're gonna cover A, B, and C, but we're gonna exclude D and E. And then you've got the fund that Lee's talking about, which essentially becomes a self-insurance fund for that portion. So, so we're gonna try to negotiate a specific policy that differs in a couple of respects from the policy that Sunrise has. And I've never looked at your policy with Philadelphia, so I can't say how that would fit.
So we're in a position where we have basically three options that you will be looking at. Option number one is the exclusion of CRW on the issues raised in 13.1. Second option is a set aside on behalf or by CRW, so that SDA would be satisfied that we have financial capability of self-insuring CRW in those two specific areas outlined in 13.1. And the third alternative is to look at outside coverage,
Right.
which is the least desirable alternative. I suppose the fourth one would be eliminating or modifying the agreement,
Right.
but that's one that we would prefer not to do. So does that
Yeah.
summarize it?
I think that's it, and I think that, and it may be there's a combination of one and two at the end of the day as well.
Okay.
Yeah, really for the CRW side of the house, remember, these provisions are not included in the policy that we have. And our board has taken the position that we're gonna set aside money in the risk pool so that we're self-insured anyway. I think what SDAO is concerned about is really the crossover provision, and that there be a firewall or petition between the coverage that they provide to Sunrise and the coverage that they don't want to provide to CRW. So I think essentially, my recommendation to the CRW board is just to note that at a future CRW meeting, and really put the petition in the agreement. I think that's probably the simplest thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's completely described.
Any further questions from any members of the board? Let them carry on. Okay. I think there's a consensus from the board to go forward and see what you can negotiate based on this discussion.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Seeing no other objection to that, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Bell. The chair would entertain a motion on item number 3 of the appointment of general managers to operate the district.
Well, Mr. Chair, I move to appoint Lee Moore and Wade Hathorn as co-general managers for this.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussions? Questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. As they say, welcome aboard. Item number 4, the appointment of an administrative agency. Is there a motion?
Move the appoint the Sunrise Water Authority as the administrative agency.
Further, I don't know if everybody heard that. The motion was to appoint Sunrise Water Authority as the administrative agency. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Questions and discussion? So it will be up to you to prepare agendas and otherwise keep us on track with your with the staff that you have that are certainly not very busy. We have
And we apologize that the CRW half of the board didn't get your packet. It was distributed last week, and we thought it went out, but it didn't go out, so. I mean, it did, but it, so we'll make sure that's taken care of in the future. I apologize. So.
I think, yes,
We should formalize the vote on that.
yes. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. I would hope that we'll see our actual backup materials at least a week in advance in the future, right? Thank you. So we have time to study. Okay. Item 5, draft of the bylaws. I have had phone calls from a number of board members who have looked at the bylaws and some discussion with General Manager Moore. And I thought we could do this portion of the agenda somewhat like CRW does work sessions, in which we can take the proposed bylaws page by page. If board members have corrections that they would like to make or additions that they would like to make, the general managers can take notes to that effect. And then the general managers, I'm sure, will have some comments about these bylaws. And then we would ask them to come back at a subsequent meeting with a clean set of proposed bylaws. So if that's amenable to everybody, we'll take it page by page and get through it as quickly as we can. Let me get to where they are myself. Actually, you know what? I have them here. There we go. Yeah, I got it. Just had to remember which file I had it in. Okay, so. Not that one. Just give me a minute. There we are. Page 1, Clackamas Regional Water Supply Commission bylaws. Is there any questions, corrections, or recommendations on page 1? And if we need to take a little time, if people haven't seen it, we'll take a little time. Yes?
This is what I was gonna say, the draft that I had was organized differently than this, and so, I guess my objections can't be, or comments can't be made unless, till we get.
We want to go, we could go article and section by article and section, if that would be easier, and that way.
Well, I'm not good at reading under pressure, so. I'll just listen to your comments. But the draft that I had went down to and referred to many places as representatives that would represent this commission. And the agreement we had with Sunrise Water, it said that this board would be the representatives, not somebody else mysteriously from Clackamas River Water. So wherever you use the word representative, you should say elected official or something like that. I don't know what that looks to be.
So it's clear who represents this board, and that it is
Well,
the members of this board that
Yeah,
represent.
only the elected members, not somebody, well, say somebody from Clackamas River Water District Office would come and represent us because they represent the board, so
Okay.
it'd be the elected official.
Are you following that way?
I got it.
Yeah, I see his point, yes, yes.
Yeah.
No, this is,
The term representative too being too broad, right? You want to be
Yeah.
very just specific about who we're speaking to,
Yes.
right? Okay, I got it. There's a few of those in there.
okay, so,
That was this point.
all right.
I have one more in that same section, really.
Okay, go ahead.
We're in the Article 2 governance, and it says members of the board of directors.
Okay.
Yes, I'm concurring with the comments Larry just made about representatives. We are silent about any concept of term limits of those people. And I don't think any has been suggested, but should we be specific that there are no term limits associated with the representatives or the elected officials that serve on this 190 board?
there would
Just
only.
a statement that there are no term limits that apply to that.
Ron?
I think it's, I don't know if it's stated directly, but it's implied that we serve at the pleasure of our board. Whichever board is that sends us here, then as long as that particular board, whether it's Sunrise that sent you and I and Deanne, they may decide tomorrow that they don't like me anymore and they would send somebody else here, but the two of you may stay. So we serve at the pleasure of our representative boards.
Yep, that was my second point, so thank you.
Okay. I think the only other way of addressing that too would be that at the annual organizational meeting of each of the respective contributing boards, the appointments are made. In other words, if we're appointed in July by our respective boards, next July, you have to be reappointed. So in a sense, that's where the limit is, that each board can control the appointment, and the timing would be at that time.
It's okay, but I believe the original agreement said that the members of this board be appointed by the president and chairman of the respective boards, not the board. So we'll need to make that clear if we're gonna have the board appointed.
I don't recall on
I
that.
think we're talking two different things perhaps there. Membership on this six-person board for the 190 Commission, that appointment is made by each of our respective individual boards to appoint whoever they want. That part needs to occur each year in July. Is that, because I think we both do our organization and assignment of liaison and other things in July.
Well, I don't know where I got the idea, but the original reading that I made said that I, as president, could appoint our board members.
Oh, okay.
And I think,
And I don't know that that's the case, that it should be, but I think that's what it said somewhere along the line.
you as chair of our board makes the appointments. I mean, we discuss it, but you make the final, you make the final appointment, and I think that's what Larry's talking about. That there may be board discussion, but the chair actually says, okay, this will be what our final appointment is.
That's what I wanted to make clear.
So I believe that's what we did also. We had
So
this.
we made a motion of the board and those people were appointed. I would have made the same appointment, but maybe down the line, they may not, there may be some trouble.
Well, here's the question, does it make any difference whether CRW does it by a vote of its board versus SWA doing it by appointment by their president?
Not-
Each board could make that determination for
I
themselves.
think
can't
that
they?
Not
was
to
the
us, the
original,
bylaws, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think that was the original. Each board has its own process for appointing
That's what I thought.
members. And it seems to me that, because I made a note of that the sponsoring or the representative commissions need to make their appointments first, let's say July. And that then maybe in August, this board would then receive whoever those people are, and then elect your officers or whatever the case may be. I think it has to be a two-step process.
But the basic point is that whether CRW does it by election or SWA does it by appointment, it doesn't make any difference
Well, that's my
to
point,
this
is that
commission.
we all have our respective bylaws.
Exactly.
And I think the message was always that each board, nothing that this board does is gonna affect that process.
So, which does go to an organizational question. Ron raised this with me over the phone, which I thought was a good one, and you alluded to it. CRW has its organizational meeting and does its board assignments, first meeting in July. as does SWA, but your meetings are later in the month. So at somewhere in here, we may wish to indicate that August is the organizational meeting for this commission. That makes sure that both boards have made their appointments, and our organizational meeting follows the respective boards' organizational meetings. So that, August would be our organizational meeting. That's my suggestion, if that's acceptable.
That was another
It
note I
doesn't.
had, so I agree.
It doesn't make any difference. I'd hate to move it from July to August when SWA chairman makes that appointment. He doesn't have to do it in a meeting, he can just do it the day before this board's meeting.
Well, let me suggest this. The second paragraph under section 1 there, the board of directors shall hold an organizational meeting following the appointment of the directors from the respective member agencies, and go on and then elect officers and the like. So just say it has to follow the appointments,
That way,
whenever that happens.
that would work.
Do you want to stipulate a time to occur no later than,
Probably a good idea.
by at least some time? I'll put something together, okay? I get your concept. Let me see if I can put something together.
I mean, we don't want to be electing officers to this commission and then find out they weren't appointed.
Commissioner, so I think that the original agreement, the 190, doesn't necessarily stipulate how any of the appointments are made. It just leaves it to the respective boards, either Sunrise or CRW, to follow whatever process they so choose, as Mr. Moore indicated, to make those appointments. So it can be done however they choose to do that.
The last item for this page that I have is, we might want to rethink the idea of alternative representatives.
Yeah.
Since any action by this commission requires at least one member from each board, the commission is perfectly capable of functioning with a quorum of 4, 3 and 1, 2 and 2, etc. So, do we really need to have alternatives? That could get difficult, and unless they attended every single meeting, they're not going to know what's going on in detail.
You're talking about alternate board members?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Given the nature of this commission, I'm not sure that maintaining alternates is necessarily a good idea.
Well,
So I thought, throw it out for discussion.
it may be very necessary, particularly on some of the votes where we have to have a unanimous vote. If we don't have an alternate to set in, you're not going to be able to take the vote, because you're not going to have everybody there. There are some pieces of business or whatever where we have to have a full vote.
I understand.
Okay, so if you've only got 5 people, like we have right now, we couldn't take that vote. If you had an alternate, and we have alternates to other commissions, and the alternate attends, so that if, basically, they attend most of the time, so that if the sitting board member can't be there, then they can step in, and they're pretty much up to speed with what's happening.
Yes.
My suggestion is that we leave the bylaws so that each agency, Clackamas or Sunrise, can appoint the members that they want to represent them, and if they so choose, they can appoint alternates. And then, the bylaws in this commission would say that we can have alternates if they're appointed by their respective boards.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which is to say, as it's written, probably works.
All right.
It says may.
Okay.
So just a point of, just so I'm reading it, and I know. So let's say that you're out and you have an alternate.
Oh, okay.
Is the alternate a member then for voting purposes, or is the alternate the chair?
The chair would be the vice
You have-
president.
Now you say the vice chair will become the chair. So is that alternate really sitting in for you is merely as a member or as a member and the chair? So therefore it needs to be clear when that happens. Otherwise you negate anything else that you've said here about succession.
Amendment on
Well, I think the bylaws are plain that if the chair is not here, it's the vice chair.
It should be there. And Ken has an alternate.
Alternate,
Yeah.
they're just a voting member.
Just a voting
Just a
alternate.
voting, yeah, voting on. Okay.
I would imagine that the concept is each of our agencies could have one or more alternates as long as they agree to attend regularly. But that alternate could sub for any one of the three representatives from that agency. It's not a one-on-one kind of arrangement.
No, it's just like it was pointed out, a voting alternate, that's all,
Yeah, to take the place of
whoever's absent.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's why, where it says alternate representative, I mean, it's just representing,
Well,
CRW or Sunrise as their representative to fill in the needed.
The needed vote.
Again, with Larry's earlier suggestion, it has to be an alternate board member from Sunrise. That way.
Well,
It can't, it has, all
It
elected.
has to be an elected official, absolutely.
So all the way through here, that the term representative as it's used has to mean board member.
At some point that has to be defined, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on page one? Hopefully the other pages will go a little bit faster. Page two.
These pages aren't numbered, so.
All right, we'll go to,
There's an extra column. That's what it's going by.
we're still in Article 1, and we're going to
That's what we're
section.
going to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're still in Article 1, we'll go to Section 3, a quorum. Any questions on quorum? I'll just take it section by section, that way that should be fairly consistent. Seeing none, Section 4, Paragraph 1, voting. Section 4, Paragraph 2, starting with the word furthermore. Mr. Moore, you raised an issue of language in this one, I believe, in referring to future assets, to clarify the asset issue. Just for general purposes, the idea here was that the commission, each of the organizations that comprise this commission own physical assets. They will continue to own their own physical assets. There's no intention of transferring those physical assets to this commission. There may, however, in the future be assets that the commission, through its two agencies, ultimately decide to purchase. And so we want to make sure that there's a difference between those assets that we currently own and that we have no intention of transferring, and future assets. And that's the only purpose of putting those words in there, just to clarify that there is a line between assets to own now and assets that the commission may choose to purchase in the future, which it can only do with the approval of its respective board members.
Unanimous approval.
Unanimous approval, yes. Any questions about that?
That, your comment, there is a question that it'd be, as far as assets go, it'd be a vote of the board of Clackamas River Water, the entire board, not just the board, three representatives that are here.
Procedurally, what would happen is, let's suppose this board decided we wanted to purchase an asset. We would then have to take that unanimous decision back to CRW and SWA, and those boards would have to vote to make that purchase. This board would have to be unanimous. The other boards would not have to be unanimous, but this board would have to be.
Or to sell.
Or to sell, but again, that's dealing with future assets. If there's no other questions on that one, Section 5 is compensation, which I believe is governed by for this anyway. Section 6, conflict of interest. Any questions about that? Mr. Moore?
And we have counsel here, but my question was, in the event of a tie, if you have an actual conflict, I think if you declare the conflict, you can become a tiebreaker. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, that's what, and this doesn't say that.
So that would be language that we would want to add. Is that your suggestion?
It's just, it's a comment, but I know that the way it's written, it sounds like you can never vote if you have an actual conflict.
Where the law does allow you to vote if you declare your conflict, at least under some circumstances.
Yeah, but it has to be, it's a vote that has to be taken, it's a tie-break situation.
Tiebreaker.
You don't participate in any of the deliberations or discussions, you have to hold your tongue and then you can vote. Really odd, quite honestly, that they would have something like that. I think the idea was that you would be able to at least keep the public business going, right? You know, whether that still keeps you out of the soup as far as getting a complaint and all that, probably not. So anyway, I think that if you, I haven't looked at the language, so I can't say. It may be just a reference to the statute itself, which has the definitions, or maybe we do it in our own narrative, but we can clarify that if you need some help with that.
Any questions from any member of the board on that? Avoid conflicts of interest.
I borrowed the language from eWeb, so.
Don't have to reinvent the wheel.
I had to go look at it.
I'm on page 3, but it's Article 3, Budgeting and Finance, Section 1. Any questions? Section 2, Budgeting. Yes?
It says the commission shall be generally funded by water sales. Is that limited, or?
Generally allows some, obviously allows some flexibility, but generally speaking, almost all of our operations in both districts are as a result of water sales. So I would assume that we're not in a position to levy a tax or anything like that.
I hope that's not the case in the future. Bond sales are not water sales.
Good point. How would we address that?
Well, we can change the term, that's why I left it as generally funded. It does allow, the statutes do in fact allow for revenue bonds to be authorized by this body, as so approved by their respective boards as well. So,
Are you suggesting we add some language that reflects that?
I think it's okay,
But I
go
can-
ahead and make a
yeah.
line.
So including bond sales?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment about that? Thank you.
Good one.
Okay, you got that?
Well, just one question.
Yes.
If this commission authorized bond sales, how would they be paid?
you can only authorize legally revenue bonds.
Revenue bond?
Yeah, so it would be through respective, water sales, if you will, or other revenue that you generate with the, that portion of it. You can't issue general obligation bonds.
I'm really hard of hearing, so I didn't get all that.
Well, the only legal instrument that you can issue are revenue bonds, and not general obligation bonds.
Yeah, but the revenue bonds, how would they be paid? They'd be paid by a vote of the various department boards to pay for them for water.
Well, the way they're called for in the original agreement, each of the respective bodies, both CRW and Sunrise, would have to agree to the purchase of those bonds and the payment thereof. And so the bodies in here, this body would agree to a certain percentage of ownership to that bond, whatever that was, right, or responsibility, and then pay so accordingly.
Would it, if this board wanted to issue those bonds, one, would that have to be unanimous from this board?
That's correct.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And then secondly, you would have to go back to CRW and SWA and get approval of that decision.
Right.
Okay, and then, once that's done, the bonds would be paid by water sales.
Yeah, but the commission doesn't sell water.
So then, what is the next step as far as how you,
This commission, it is the purpose that in the future that this commission will sell water to its bodies in time or even outside it could do that, right? It can make various water sale agreements within the organization itself. So this body will in fact sell water to each other or to other parties if they so choose to do.
And you have to identify the funding source as a part of issuing the bond. Now, here under 7.2 of the 190, it says funding for the commission is principally to come from a combination of cash contributions and water sales as approved by the biennial budgeting process outlined in 5.3. And that would have to be by vote of this group and the sponsoring agencies, the way that we have it written.
Well, I'm still not clear. How does this commission get any water to sell?
the question is,
You
how
said
does the
you
commission?
sell back and forth. Water sales now are governed by agreements of each party.
Right.
And you propose, say, Clackamas Rural Water selling 10 million gallons a day to this commission, and this commission then would sell it back to CRW, or?
The original agreement, the 190, actually allocates, CRW allocates the possibility of up to 10 million gallons of water to be sold inside the commission with respect to its participating members. And or there could be other water sales established in the future accordingly. But there is also a means by how that's done and what the cost is associated with it as well, too, and what the price is. So there's a pricing mechanism established in the 190 as well as the, if you will, the accessibility or the access to potential sales within the commission itself.
CRW has essentially agreed with SWA to make 10 million gallons of water available for sale to Sunrise
Right.
or other commission members if other organizations were to join the commission. CRW still owns the water, so it's not giving it away or anything like that, but it has a set aside of its total potential capacity of 10 million gallons.
Well, I agree with that, but
So on that,
that doesn't sound like the same thing he said.
did I misstate anything?
That's true, yeah, so I don't know,
We're setting aside 10, and we're continuing the sale of 2.5 from CRW to
Right.
Sunrise.
That's correct. Maybe I'm not following exactly what the question is.
Well, I think the Sunrise General Manager said that this commission would own water and sell it to people.
no, they don't, you have, I didn't say you own the water, I said you have the right to have sales occur within that, yeah. So we were very specific about the fact that physical
We
assets.
were clear that this commission doesn't own any water.
That's right, so it's, yeah, it was very clear in there that there were no transfers of water rights, no transfers of physical assets and the like in there, just available capacity, so you could in fact sell water,
I
okay,
knew that
within
was
the
in the
commission.
original.
Yeah, and that's what it says.
190.
He was just clarifying that.
Yeah.
Concerned that this would go beyond that.
No, it can't, yeah.
One of the comments that I have, and it maybe when Wade and I get together, once we get all the comments, we may want to go back to that, because one of the suggestions I have to keep this from being so confusing is to let the 190 and the language therein stand on its own, and have this really be an operating document for the commission. That might help clarify some of the confusion.
Because there's a lot of duplication in these bylaws, based on what you pointed out, quite frankly. It's the same language is already in the 190.
Yeah,
so-
this is a draft,
Yeah.
and we're treating it that way until we can get the feedback.
Yeah. So are we ready to move to the next one? Okay. Section 2, budgeting. Any question on that paragraph?
Just to affirm, we are committed to a biannual budget. I think, yeah, there was some
It
question
says,
about that.
it says shall prepare and adopt.
The accounting people, I think.
I think Lynn may have.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, it is
Yeah.
a biennial budget, not a biannual.
Right.
Oh.
Because it says biannual.
It's supposed to be biennial.
Biennial.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering about that, but you're the administrative agency.
And the spell checker or whatever got it. It auto-populated that word.
It doesn't pick up on legal terms.
Got out from underneath that one quickly, didn't you?
Didn't write it.
Okay, any more questions on that? Section 3, audits. Likewise, change the word.
Sorry, it is an annual audit. You must have an annual audit. Even if you have a biennial budget, you must be in audit
Annual
annually.
audit.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, that answers that. Well, this says fiscal period, so we need to say annually.
Yeah.
Okay, good enough?
Mr. Moore, you raised an issue regarding the audit. It basically was, do we want to do, when do we want to do our audit? Because we obviously have, each of the respective boards have their yearly audits to do. And I would assume that the audit of this would need to be included in those audits at some point, or in some manner.
Yeah, quite frankly, I was gonna defer, this is a question to folks, is will the results of this audit need to be reviewed by our respective agency auditors, which means that this audit would need to come first before the agency audits, and I think you guys are on the same schedule as us, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, and so that was my point, it seems to me that there's a coordination issue here that needs to be dealt with.
As a clarification, yes, the auditors will look at the results of this audit. The information will be put in and compiled into the respective audits of each agency.
So then do we need, under this section, do we need to establish when we're going to do the audits for this organization?
This one says within 6 months.
It's required by statute.
The actual dates? Okay.
But it's not 6 months the limit. And if it went all the way to 6 months, that would not end up affording enough time to our individual boards audits.
Then the individual agencies would have to ask for an extension.
Well, should we reduce this 6 months, or can we even reduce this 6 months to something less?
That's the
This
question.
is an administrative issue. It's got to be resolved.
Administrative issues. We could set it that it has to be completed within 4 months after the end of the fiscal year.
Does the board want to involve itself in that decision, or let the financial officer and the general managers determine the administrative rules? The objective being to get it done before our audits.
I think we're bringing this all back to look at it again. I
Yes.
think that's something that they can look at and see what they can do with the timeline, and then make that change and bring it back with the rest of it.
That seem reasonable to everybody? Okay, so essentially, work with your staff to determine what an appropriate timeline would be. The objective is to make sure that the audit of the 190 is completed prior, and so it can be included in the audits of CRW and SWA respectively. That's the objective. Section 4, biennial, or will that have to be annual also?
It just didn't get through the spell check. I think.
No,
What do you mean, the true up thing?
Yeah. Would that have to be an annual or biennial?
No, that's a biennial.
Biennial.
That can be biennial, okay. Any questions on section 4, first paragraph? Okay. Going to section 5, issuance of debt. That may address a number of Commissioner Soa's questions.
And again, these are provisions, and maybe what we do is that, you know, these are all provisions that are in the original agreement.
Yeah.
And so maybe what we do is just remove this stuff, because it's all specifically called out for in the 190.
I want to take it a paragraph at a time, make sure that every member has an opportunity. Yes.
This is part of the 190, and I don't know that it needs to be in our operating.
Yeah, that's
what
the
he's
point I think that they're talking about.
Yeah.
It could be scratched out of here.
Okay, Article 4, assets.
Before we,
Oh, excuse me, go back up. Section 5, issuance of debt. Go ahead, Commissioner Soa.
I'm still, I feel that this is not complete. This allows construction of improvements, and if it's a construction of a reservoir, so to speak, that's owned by this commission, then the commission owns the water that's in that reservoir. And it goes back to commission, this commission not owning the water.
The issues of, suppose this commission votes and it's approved by its respective boards to build a reservoir, an additional reservoir, okay? That hard asset clearly is owned by the commission if they agree to build it per the proper process. Who owns the water in it? That's the question.
Whichever agency comes.
Whoever uses the water. So
So-
for example, we're talking about a joint, and you correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about potentially a joint reservoir at 151st. Or one, is that right, 151st? That's also the point of taking for Sunrise. And so as we put our cost model together, the cost would be from that point, once it's taken, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know from a legal perspective if that issue's ever been, you know, tried essentially in the issue. I don't necessarily believe, from, you know, the way that it's normally done, that there's ownership implied by the water associated with a reservoir per se, just the capacity in it. So let's say we built a 10 million gallon reservoir, and each of Sunrise and CRW paid 50-50 for ownership in that. So each of them had 5 million gallons of storage available to them there. They can use 5 million gallons of storage to move their water, their respective waters in and out of that facility. Right? So you could think of it like Sunrise using 5 million gallons of that reservoir to put Sunrise's water in. And you could think of it as CRW using 5 million gallons of water, 5 million gallons of storage capacity to put its water in.
Now suppose CRW puts 10 million gallons of water in that reservoir and Sunrise wants to buy 5 million of it. That's what would happen, right?
Of the capacity of the storage reservoir?
No, the actual water. Suppose CRW fills that tank with 10 million gallons of water. And Sunrise, under our agreement of the set-aside, decides it would like to buy 5 million gallons of it. So CRW still owns the water, it just falls in under the purchase agreement that we haven't until such time as you actually purchase the water.
I guess I'm not following you in the sense that, does CRW own the entire reservoir?
No,
Then
we're only talking about the water in it, because that was the question that was raised.
but I'm saying that from an operational point of view, then Sunrise would have 5 million gallons of capacity in there, right?
Or however much it
And so would
wants to run.
CRW, right? So I don't know how you get to the notion that there's 10 million gallons of CRW water in the tank. It would have been purchased by somebody and then essentially put into that reservoir,
It could be
right?
Okay.
Right, so there would have been a water supply agreement, and for instance, Sunrise gets water from multiple locations. It could be commission water, okay? We don't think the notion that somebody owns the water per se, but other than the capacity for using that facility. So they have 5 million gallons, each party had 5 million gallons of storage at a particular hydraulic grade line, because that's what's important, its elevation and something, right? To use operationally to drive or deliver water to their respective bodies, right?
Like a warehouse.
No,
You're gonna have a cost of treatment that's gonna be shared by both parties to fill the capacity of that reservoir. And then you're gonna meter from that point based upon demand. So if Sunrise wanted 7 million gallons of that water, then they would pay for 7 million gallons of that water.
if they put 5 million in, they'd only have to pay for 2 million of it then.
Well, we would be putting it in because we're the one that's providing the water to that point.
Okay. So in any case, the water gets purchased, it's not, okay.
Right.
That's the, I think, the key point. Does that clarify it? That the water would have to be purchased?
As long as everybody's clear, right? I can imagine that if we build a reservoir, we're gonna put, Clackamas River Water's gonna put some water in that. And we're gonna do it through a meter that goes in there. And then there's another meters that, on the other side, that lets it out. So then we know who uses the water.
Well, that's not how you would actually, well, can I correct some things here? That's not how this would actually work, all right? You wouldn't meter a tank, okay? So maybe the reservoir is a bad example, because what would really happen was we'd have a water supply agreement between the parties to purchase a certain amount of water, for instance, from CRW. Let's say Sunrise had an agreement to buy 5 million gallons of water, right? In that agreement, there would be, and the way it's set up, is to pay for the full cost of the delivery of that water to some location, all right? So if CRW was paying to pump it up to that reservoir, then that would be part of the cost. If they were actually pumping it, okay, then Sunrise would have to reimburse or pay for the cost of the pumping as well. So whatever the real cost of delivery to a particular point is actually paid for in the water supply agreements. And so operationally, the water just goes into the tank and goes out operationally. It's going up and down every day and every hour, right, as things are moving in and out of there. So it's just a facility within that. But the arrangement for cost is all taken into account, not only the treatment cost, but the delivery costs and all those pieces that are going into it accordingly, right? So the assets themselves or the physical piece of the delivery is just an operational condition. It's not a contractual one. So in other words, what you own is you own storage capacity at a certain hydraulic grade line in order to operate your facilities. But the costs then take all that into account, right? And then the reimbursement accordingly between the parties is stipulated therein, right?
I don't disagree with you, I just wanna make sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to make sure that it's clear that that's how it goes, so, you know, that it's, I think it's a misnomer to assume that somehow, you know, it's pre-purchased, the water, once it goes into the distribution side. Okay, those agreements and arrangements are made out beforehand, right? They're so-called.
Because on the outtake side, that's gonna be Sunrise and whatever cost it has to get the water to its customer.
Yeah, wherever that may go.
Right, so.
We may take it again and pump it up again somewhere, or you may take it and pump it up somewhere again, right?
Okay, are we clear? And you understand
That's a good
what he's
point.
asking to have?
They're
No,
clear
but-
on it.
Make sure that the language reflects
Right.
Dr. Silva's issue. Okay? Okay, any other questions? Section 2 was sale or transfer. Note, once again, unanimous approval by the board to do so. If there's no questions, Section 3, asset management program. Questions?
I guess this refers to a 5-year review, and yet we do biennial budgets. Want to make that an even number?
Yeah, I thought about that when I
Otherwise,
came
it's
across it
gonna
with
hit that
that.
cycle on somebody.
The important element to this piece of it, that's not necessarily called for specifically in the agreement, it's implied by it, but that, again, a piece of the cost that goes to the arrangement of any water sales therein, okay, have to include depreciation, right, the appropriate value of replacement of those assets as well. And so that's why this is an important piece of it, so that that's actually being kept up and people know what that real depreciation number is as a result of that, right? So,
Do we want to make that a 4-year or 6-year program, and do you have a recommendation?
I don't, 6 years is fine, it'll be done, you know, in coordination with that budget, so it doesn't change that much, right? So,
Is 6 years satisfactory for everybody?
Says at least.
yeah.
Okay. Hearing no objections. Article 5, capital improvements. First part of the paragraph is on page 4. Okay. Next section is section 2, system expansion.
This comes directly out of the agreement, it appears.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is.
Yeah.
In fact, I think a lot of Article 6 also does. So do we want to basically potentially strike system expansion and Article 6, which is the water supply agreement section, because that's straight out of the 190. Doesn't
Should
it?
just refer back to the sections that are in the agreement.
Yeah.
Because I do have a concern that, heaven forbid, we end up with documents that have conflicting information. Or we make an amendment in one and forget to do it to the other one, or whatever.
So is there a consensus then to just simply remove section 2, system expansion, and start with that?
Well,
And essentially,
Because it's in the 190.
That's throughout the document, where there is redundancy, refer to the.
yeah, I don't limit to which sections we're talking about, just where possible, if it's a reiteration of the basic agreement, do it by reference.
Okay. Then point out as we go forward what apparently is going to be that case, because obviously system expansion is that, water supply agreement is. Is it additional capacity?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would suggest then that I take another shot, that Lee and I take another shot at putting this together, because in large part, the remaining portions, and large part of a lot of this document has that kind of language attached to it. So maybe the one thing we can do with some time this morning, if it's appropriate, is maybe take some input from all of you. So what do you want to see in your bylaws, you know, and what are some of the relevant pieces that you want to try to establish? Because I've looked up, you know, and it could be more about how we conduct meetings when they're done and those kind of things. I mean, I don't, you know, because a lot of it, this is like the language that's in the 190, it's in the agreement itself. So maybe I need to reconstruct a document that doesn't rely on that language, but rather puts in here some administrative guidelines or purpose, if you will, for this governing body.
Yeah, I personally think that's a good idea, because as you say, a lot of it's a reiteration
Right.
of what we already have in the 190, and really the purpose of the bylaw is supposed to be how we function
Right.
as a board, more than anything else,
How we conduct our
how we conduct our business.
Yeah, my concern is that we don't have a 190 agreement and then our bylaws say something else.
The same thing expressed by another. Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, let me do that. Let me take another shot at this and not waste everybody's time here, and we'll get it back out to you the next time to do that. How about that? Unless there's specific things that you want to express now that should be in those bylaws, like some of the things we talked about with alternates and other kind of things, those are relevant discussions to have, I think, that are helpful, so.
I think that basically how we conduct
our business.
Our business and, you know, the part about the alternate, too. And, yeah, I think you guys.
It's gonna be pretty short.
That would shorten this document.
Considerably.
It might be a one pager.
Have about one page, yeah.
Well, you know, I think most of us envision that once we get through this administrative and organizational stuff, that most of the operations are gonna be through the general managers, and we will not have to be revisiting a lot of this stuff very frequently at all, frankly.
Well, we would still owe the board an operating plan, which
Yes.
is called for in the 190 document. Anyway, so.
As a result of CRW's meeting, we do need to do something procedurally to make sure that it's done correctly. This board, and you could guide me a little bit on this if you would, but we basically need to make a budget request at some point for funds from each of the two districts. This board needs to make that request formally so that the respective districts can then actually vote to fund this board's functions. I don't anticipate that it's going to be a lot of money, but it's going to be some money, and it needs to be properly requested and approved and accounted for by the respective boards. That was an issue at our last meeting. I'd like to see that gets addressed as soon as possible. I know you're going to need funds to move us forward.
Right. And as part of plan, you know, we have a schedule inside of that, inside of the 190 that lays out some key milestones early. Of course, the Secretary of State's filing in 30 days is why we're meeting to get prepared for that. The next one is it calls for this body to create an interim budget within the first 60 days of its life, essentially, to put back before the other boards for interim approval for that budget, right? So we anticipate doing that at this next month's meeting. We meet again this next month to do just that, okay, in anticipation of that 60-day schedule.
So you will have a budget request for us agendized for the next meeting.
That's correct.
Okay, and likewise, a proposed set of bylaws again.
Mhm.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
And both of the board members are here, but I think in addition to that request, what I heard at the CRW board meeting is some idea of what that money's for, so that we.
Yes.
You know, I think that was part of the issue that I heard.
And that allows finance officers to make the adjustments where legitimate and appropriate in our budgets, because we obviously didn't initially anticipate a line item in the budget for something like this. So if we need to address that, we can address that. Is there anything else that any other board member can think of that we would need to have on the next meeting's agenda?
Speaking of next meeting agenda, like I said, I don't read very well under pressure. How are we going to get this packet in the future, and at what time frame, so that we have time, a day or two, to go through it?
Yeah, we will attempt to try to get it to you, and we should query all of you since you're here, how you want it delivered to you. And so we can do that in anticipation of getting it to you, you know, about a week before the meeting. Okay, so you have that time to do it. So we generally know how we deliver it to you, right? Correctly, and we deliver it to you, and you want it delivered to you,
Yes.
okay, specifically, or you get it visually.
I get electronic.
Right, yeah, okay. And Commissioner Sewell, you have it delivered to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
We know how to get it to them.
All right, so in the future, you will get your materials approximately a week before the meeting, okay?
Any other issues that, from any other member of the board before we move to the final item on our agenda? Okay. The final item is public comment. Is there anyone in the public who would like to make comment today? Seeing none, any reports from any of the directors or any other issues you would like to raise today? Any other directions that you may care to give to the general managers?
February 10th, 6 p.m.
February 10th, 6 p.m., Sunrise Water Authority will be our next meeting. That is
Say it one more time.
February 10th at sunrise. Do we want to look ahead to March and go ahead and calendar a meeting for March? So we can keep at least 1 month ahead of the game?
What is it, the
I
second?
wrote down March 10th.
Was the second Monday of the.
It's still the second Monday, so,
I might
and it's a
suggest-
UK and Australian holiday, not ours.
I might suggest if we put March 10th on the calendar, if it turns out we get everything done at that February meeting that needs to be done, we can decide not to meet. But,
Okay.
I think we might have the need for one more meeting, I'm guessing.
March 10th?
March 10th?
Second Monday.
And you want to stick with, that would be here at CRW, you want to stick with 10 a.m. or would you prefer to go to 6 p.m.?
I have it at 6, that's what we decided last time.
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. And that one will be here.
The February meeting at 6 p.m. too.
Yes, at sunrise. Okay. No other questions, no other business? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.